The crystalline corridors of the Eternal Harmony gleamed under the soft ambient lighting as Security Chief Carax conducted her nightly patrol. Her footsteps, carefully measured and controlled, echoed through the empty halls. Each step required precise calculation. Too much force would crack the polished floor panels. Too little would reveal her unusual gait adapted to her home world's crushing gravity. The diplomatic vessel housed representatives from over 50 species, each believing they understood the full spectrum of sentient life in the galaxy. Carax allowed herself a small smile at their ignorance. None of them suspected that their chief of security hailed from Nexus, a planet classified as a death world, due to its brutal 15 times standard gravity and caustic atmosphere. She paused at the grand observation deck, her reflection casting across the transparent aluminum viewport. Even after 5 years aboard, the sight of her own image sometimes startled her. The genetic modifications her people had developed helped her pass as a standard gravity species, her dense muscle structure hidden beneath a more conventional frame, her reinforced skeleton disguised by careful posture training. The ship's manifest update chimed on her datapad, drawing her attention to the upcoming arrival of the first Earth delegation. Carax scrolled through the preliminary data, noting the standard atmospheric requirements and gravity specifications. Something about the numbers didn't quite align with her instincts, but she dismissed the thought. After all, she had learned to doubt her initial assessments of other species. Too often, she projected her own experiences onto them. At the security station, Carax began her standard systems check. The Eternal Harmony utilized cutting-edge technology to maintain artificial gravity throughout its various sectors, accommodating the diverse needs of its passengers. She had personally calibrated many of these systems, ensuring they could handle sudden fluctuations without revealing her enhanced capabilities during emergencies. A notification flashed across her screen. The Earth delegation had requested slightly higher gravity in their assigned quarters. The adjustment fell within standard parameters, but combined with their atmospheric preferences, it painted an intriguing picture. Carax found herself pulling up archived data about Earth, searching for clues she might have missed in her previous assessments. The official records described a perfectly ordinary Class 3 planet, and yet scattered throughout the data were subtle inconsistencies. References to multiple climate zones ranging from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts, atmospheric pressure variations that would kill most species, gravity fluctuations across the planetary surface that exceeded safe limits for standard world inhabitants. Carax's heart quickened as she dug deeper. The humans had provided extensive cultural documentation, but very little detailed biological data. Their medical records were surprisingly vague, focusing on basic compatibility rather than specific adaptations. It was almost as if she shut down that line of thinking immediately. She had spent too many years hoping to find others like her, only to face disappointment. The humans were probably just another standard species with good environmental shielding technology. Their planet likely relied on artificial climate control, like so many others in the galaxy. Still, as she completed her patrol route, Carax found herself anticipating the Earth delegation's arrival with unexpected intensity. She had learned to control her strength, to move delicately through a galaxy built for lighter beings. But sometimes, in moments of solitude like this, she longed to meet someone who understood what it meant to carry the weight of a death world in their bones. The stars streamed past the viewport, each one potentially harboring another world like hers. Tomorrow, she would meet the humans and confirm they were exactly what their records claimed, ordinary inhabitants of an ordinary world. Until then, she allowed herself one small moment of hope, quickly suppressed beneath years of careful control and practiced deception. The docking bay hummed with anticipation as the Earth shuttle made its final approach. Carax stood at attention, observing the gathered diplomats with practiced neutrality. The ship's artificial gravity had been adjusted to standard levels for the welcoming ceremony, making her feel uncomfortably light on her feet. Ambassador Sarah Chen emerged first from the shuttle, and Carax's trained eye caught something immediately different in her movement. The human walked with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the standard gravity setting. Most species from regular worlds moved with either excessive bounce or careful hesitation when adjusting to new gravitational conditions. Chen did neither. The welcome ceremony proceeded according to protocol, with various council members stepping forward to greet the Earth delegation. Crax maintained her position near the secondary support struts, a location that offered both optimal security coverage and structural stability, should she need to move quickly. Years of experience had taught her the safest places to exert force without damaging the ship's infrastructure. A subtle vibration caught her attention. The support beam above the gathering showed microscopic signs of stress, invisible to standard sensors, but clear to her enhanced senses. Crax calculated the trajectories and possible outcomes in a fraction of a second. The beam wouldn't hold for more than another minute. Before she could issue an evacuation order, Ambassador Chen's head snapped up, her eyes focusing on the exact same point Crax had identified. Their gazes met for a brief moment, sharing an impossible recognition. The beam groaned. Time seemed to slow. Crax launched herself forward, no longer concerned with maintaining her cover. Simultaneously, Chen moved with equal speed, her diplomatic robes flowing behind her as she matched Crax's pace exactly. They'd reached the gathering of diplomats just as the beam gave way. Working in unconscious synchronization, they caught the falling structure. Crax braced for the impact, expecting to bear the full weight alone. Instead, she felt the load distribute evenly between them. Chen's smaller frame showed no strain as she helped stabilize the massive beam, her movements precise and controlled. The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with most attendees too focused on escaping to notice the impossible feat occurring above them. Crax and Chen held the beam until the last diplomat cleared the area, then carefully guided it to the floor with minimal structural damage. In the aftermath, they stood facing each other in the empty docking bay. Sweat beaded on Chen's forehead, but her breathing remained steady. She showed none of the exhaustion or shock that a standard gravity species should display after such exertion. That was impressive reaction time. Security Chief Crax, Chen said, brushing dust from her robes with deliberate casualness. Most people wouldn't have even noticed the structural weakness. Most people wouldn't have been able to assist in stabilizing it. Ambassador Chen, Crax responded, studying the human with new understanding. Particularly not in standard gravity conditions. A smile tugged at Chen's lips. Standard is relative, wouldn't you say? Depending on where you're from. The implications hung in the air between them. Crax had spent years watching for others like herself, yet she'd never expected to find one arriving so openly from an unclassified world. She thought of the inconsistencies in Earth's records, the vague medical data, the atmospheric variations that should have been impossible to survive. Perhaps, Crax said carefully, we should discuss our relative standards in private, Ambassador. Chen nodded, her eyes showing the same mix of caution and hope that Crax felt. I believe that would be wise. After all, we wouldn't want any misunderstandings about today's incident. Some things are better discussed away from standard observation. The emphasis on standard wasn't lost on either of them. As they left the docking bay, Crax noticed that Chen matched her stride perfectly, both of them moving with the careful precision of those accustomed to restraining far greater strength than they showed. The ship's arboretum provided perfect cover for their conversation. Exotic plants from 1,000 worlds created natural privacy screens, while the constant hum of environmental systems masked their voices. Crax led them to a section featuring specimens from high-gravity worlds, the reinforced platforms beneath their feet designed to support the dense vegetation. Your world, Crax began, watching Chen's reaction carefully. Earth isn't listed as a death world in any official records. Chen ran her fingers along the bark of a massive tree, its trunk thick enough to withstand 30 times standard gravity. We've worked hard to keep it that way. Humanity learned early in our space exploration that being different wasn't always an advantage. Yet you chose to reveal yourself to me, Crax observed, noting how Chen's fingers left slight impressions in the supposedly impervious bark. You're from Nexus, Chen stated rather than asked. The way you move, The controlled strength. I studied every known high-gravity species in preparation for this mission. Your people are the only ones who could match our capabilities. Carax's hearts quickened at the casual revelation. Earth's gravity. Variable, Chen explained, a smile playing at her lips. Depending on location, anywhere from 0.9 to 1.1 of what we consider our standard. But that's just the beginning. Our oceans reach crushing depths that would implode most spacecraft. Our temperature ranges span from polar ice to desert heat that could melt standard environmental suits. The description sparked memories of Nexus. My world has constant storms that could tear apart orbital stations. The gravity is crushing, but it's the atmosphere that truly marks it as a death world, caustic enough to dissolve standard protection in minutes. Chen nodded, understanding, lighting her eyes. Earth's atmospheric composition would be toxic to most species without significant processing. We've learned to filter our air for visitors, present a more palatable version of our world. How do your people handle space travel? Carax asked, genuinely curious. The lighter gravity. Enhanced inner ear adaptation, Chen explained. We can function in anything from 0 to 3 times Earth standard without noticeable impairment. I'm guessing Nixidians have similar capabilities. Carax demonstrated by suddenly shifting her weight distribution, moving with impossible speed despite the artificial gravity. We adapt quickly. Though maintaining the appearance of normal movement in standard gravity requires constant concentration. The eternal dance, Chen agreed. Always holding back. Careful not to grip too hard or move too fast. She paused, considering. Though I noticed you didn't hold back in the docking bay. Neither did you, Carax pointed out. That beam would have killed anyone else attempting to catch it. Chen's expression grew serious. We couldn't let them die, even if it meant exposing ourselves. No, Carax agreed. We couldn't. The shared understanding passed between them. The weight of being different, of having to hide their true nature, balanced against their dedication to protecting others. Our worlds shaped us differently. Chen continued, gesturing to the various plants around them. Like these specimens, we adapted to our environments. Earth forced us to become versatile, ready for any challenge. Nexus demanded raw power and resilience. Different solutions to similar problems, Carax observed. Your adaptability, our strength. Complementary traits rather than competing ones. Chen's eyes sparkled with possibility. Imagine what we could accomplish together, instead of hiding separately. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Carax had spent so long concealing her true nature, the thought of working openly with someone who understood seemed almost impossible. Yet here was living proof that her people weren't alone in the galaxy. It would change everything, Carax said softly. Maybe it's time for change, Chen replied, her voice equally quiet but filled with determination. After all, we found each other now. There's no going back to thinking we're alone. The medical bay's new scanning equipment arrived 3 days after Carax and Chen's conversation in the Arboretum. Carax watched from her security station as the enhanced biological sensors were installed, each one capable of detecting the minutest details of any species' physical makeup. The official announcement called it a routine upgrade for health and safety protocols. Chen found her during the night cycle, moving silently through the dimmed corridors. They're installing the same equipment in the diplomatic wing, she said without preamble. Mandatory screenings begin next week. Carax nodded, having already reviewed the schedule. Standard procedure requires all crew members to undergo baseline scans before any diplomatic personnel. She met Chen's gaze. I'm scheduled for tomorrow morning. They'll detect the enhanced muscle density, Chen said, her voice barely above a whisper. The reinforced skeletal structure, the improved nervous system response time. Just as they'll detect your adaptations, Carax agreed. Unless. A small smile crossed Chen's face. Unless the equipment experiences unexpected calibration issues during the initial testing phase. They moved through the ship like shadows, their enhanced abilities allowing them to avoid the night patrol routes Carax had carefully designed with such gaps. The medical bay's security systems posed no challenge to someone who had installed them. While Carax adjusted the sensor calibrations, Chen accessed the baseline data archives. "We're not just protecting ourselves," she said, fingers flying over the console. "There are others. My team found evidence of at least 3 more species hiding their true nature." The revelation caused Carax to pause momentarily. More Deathworlders. Different adaptations, same fear of discovery. Chen finished uploading the modified baseline data. Not everyone evolved to handle crushing gravity or toxic atmospheres. Some developed other traits their worlds demanded: enhanced speed, extreme temperature tolerance, the ability to process radiation. Carax considered this as she completed the sensor adjustments. The idea that more species had hidden their true nature made perfect sense. After all, hadn't her own people chosen secrecy over persecution? A noise in the corridor outside froze them both. Their enhanced hearing picked up the sound of approaching footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Carax recognized the pattern. Security patrol, off schedule. Chen looked at the console, then at the door. "We need 3 more minutes for the changes to properly integrate." Carax made a quick decision. "The maintenance shaft," she said, pointing to a nearly invisible panel in the wall. "It's reinforced to handle emergency pressure variations." They slipped into the narrow shaft just as the medical bay doors opened. Through the thin wall, they could hear the patrol conducting their sweep. Carax and Chen stood perfectly still, their bodies pressed together in the confined space, each controlling their breathing with practiced precision. The patrol lingered longer than standard procedure dictated. Carax could sense Chen's muscles tensing, ready for any necessary action. But their preparation proved unnecessary. The patrol moved on, leaving them in the darkness of the maintenance shaft. They waited an extra minute before emerging. The console showed the integration had completed successfully. Anyone scanned by the new equipment would register within expected parameters for their declared species. "This buys us time," Chen said as they carefully erased all evidence of their presence. "But they'll try again. Different methods, new technology. Then we'll adapt," Carax replied. "It's what our kinds do best." She secured the last access panel. "You said there are others like us. Perhaps it's time we found them." Chen's expression turned thoughtful. A network of hidden Deathworlders, working together instead of hiding separately. She nodded slowly. "It's risky, but the potential benefits could change everything." Carax finished. "Just like you said in the Arboretum." They parted ways at the intersection of diplomatic and crew quarters, each returning to their role of careful pretense. But something had shifted. They were no longer just 2 individuals protecting their secrets. They were the beginning of something larger, a hidden community waiting to be discovered. The peace conference was proceeding smoothly when the first meteor struck the Eternal Harmony shields. Carax felt the impact through the deck plates, her enhanced senses registering the vibration before the alarm systems activated. The artificial gravity flickered ominously. "All personnel, secure crash positions," the ship's automated system announced. Gravitational stabilizers experiencing unexpected fluctuation. Carax watched in horror as the gravity indicator on her security panel spiraled out of control. Different sections of the ship were experiencing wildly varying gravitational forces. The diplomatic chamber, currently hosting 37 species representatives, showed a reading of 3 times standard gravity and rising. She caught Chen's eye across the room. The human diplomat had already noticed the same readings, her posture shifting subtly to compensate for the increasing pressure. Around them, other diplomats began to collapse, their bodies unprepared for the crushing force. Another impact rocked the ship. The engineering readout showed critical damage to the main gravitational control systems. Secondary and tertiary backups engaged and failed in rapid succession, each meteor strike further destabilizing the delicate balance. "We need to reach engineering," Chen said, suddenly beside Carax. Both of them stood firmly while others around them struggled to move. "The automatic systems are making it worse by trying to compensate." Carax nodded, already calculating the fastest route. "The direct path is through the cargo hold, but with gravity fluctuations. The cargo hold will be a death trap, Chen finished. Loose containers in variable gravity. We'll have to take the maintenance tunnels. The ship groaned as another meteor found its mark. The gravity in their section suddenly dropped to near zero, sending unprepared crew members floating toward the ceiling. Carax and Chen instantly adjusted their movements, using their Deathworld-trained reflexes to maintain control. They reached the maintenance access point just as the gravity shifted again, this time to 5 times standard. The change would have crushed ordinary beings, but for them, it felt almost familiar, almost like home. The tunnels weren't designed for these conditions, Carax warned as they entered the narrow passage. The reinforcement might not hold. Chen's smile was barely visible in the emergency lighting. Good thing we're built to hold it ourselves. They moved through the ship's skeleton with precise coordination. Each section presented a new challenge. One moment they were climbing through crushing gravity. The next, they were navigating zero corridors, where a single wrong move could send them crashing into walls designed for much weaker impacts. Near engineering, they encountered their first major obstacle. A support beam had buckled under the stress, nearly sealing the passage. The space that remained was barely large enough for one person to squeeze through. "I'll hold it," Carax said, bracing herself against the twisted metal. "You're more agile." Chen shook her head. "We both know I'm not leaving you behind." On 3. Together, they pressed against the beam. Metal screamed in protest as their combined strength forced the passage wider. Any normal beings would have been crushed by the effort, but their Deathworld physiology turned the impossible into merely difficult. They broke through into engineering just as the gravity plating in that section failed completely. Tools and equipment floated freely, turning the room into a minefield of potential projectiles. Through the chaos, Carax spotted the main control panel, its displays showing cascading failures throughout the system. "Can you reach it?" Chen asked, both of them anchored to the doorframe. Carax measured the distance, calculated the floating debris patterns. "Yes, but someone needs to secure that broken coolant line first, or none of this will matter." They shared a look of perfect understanding. 2 Deathworlders, each uniquely suited to handle conditions that would kill anyone else. In that moment, they weren't hiding anymore. They were exactly what they needed to be. Engineering's emergency lighting cast strange shadows as Carax launched herself through the zero-gravity environment. She weaved between floating equipment with practiced precision, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to predict and avoid the chaotic paths of debris. Behind her, Chen moved with equal grace toward the ruptured coolant line. The ship's internal cameras tracked their movements, broadcasting the feed to every functioning screen throughout the vessel. Neither of them had time to worry about their exposure now. Survival took precedence over secrecy. Carax reached the main control panel just as another meteor impact sent a shudder through the hull. The gravity plating spasmed, cycling between crushing force and weightlessness in random patterns. She anchored herself using handholds that would have crumpled under her grip if she hadn't helped design them specifically for emergency situations. "Coolant line is holding," Chen called out, her voice steady, despite having just sealed a breach that would have frozen most species solid. "But we got another problem. The primary core stabilizer is showing signs of magnetic field collapse." The engineering display confirmed Chen's assessment. Without the stabilizer, the ship's power core would go critical within minutes. Carax's fingers flew across the control panel, trying to reroute power through secondary systems. "The backup circuits are fused," she reported, feeling the heat of overloading systems through the reinforced panels. "We need to reset the whole system manually." Chen appeared beside her, frost still clinging to her hair from the coolant repair. "The reset switch is in the high-gravity chamber. Even if we could reach it in these conditions, the chamber's rated for 50 times standard gravity," Carax finished. "No normal species could survive long enough to complete the sequence." They shared a look of understanding. The high-gravity chamber had been designed as a last-resort containment system, meant to protect the rest of the ship by concentrating gravitational forces in one reinforced section. No one had ever expected anyone to enter it while active. "Good thing we're not normal," Chen said, a determined smile crossing her face. "What's the sequence?" Crax pulled up the reset protocol on her datapad. 3 switches, specific timing. They have to be thrown simultaneously to prevent power surge feedback. Then we do it together. Chen studied the diagram. Like catching that support beam, but with more style. The ship's broadcast system crackled to life, carrying the captain's voice. "Engineering team, we're reading critical core instability. Whatever you're planning, do it fast." They moved to the chamber's entrance, where emergency seals had already engaged to contain the gravitational forces within. Crax entered her override code, and the doors slid open with a hiss of pressurized air. The gravity hit them like a physical wall. Even with their Deathworld physiology, moving required intense concentration. They pushed forward step by step, their bodies remembering similar conditions from their respective homeworlds. Like a light breeze on Nexus, Crax said through gritted teeth, though they both knew she was understating the challenge. Chen's laugh was strained but genuine. "Reminds me of Earth's deep ocean trenches." Though the view was better there. They reached the control panel, positioning themselves on either side. The reset switches glowed red in the darkness, their simple design belying their critical importance. Crax took the left position while Chen braced herself on the right. "On my mark," Crax said, watching the power readings fluctuate. They would have one chance to synchronize perfectly. 3, 2, 1. Their movements aligned with millisecond precision, each switch engaging at exactly the right moment. The chamber filled with a deep hum of power systems recycling, gravity waves rippling around them as the ship's core began to stabilize. Through the chamber's reinforced viewport, they could see the engineering crews staring in amazement. The camera feeds were still active, showing 2 beings standing strong in conditions that should have been impossible to survive. The council chamber felt different now. Crax stood at her usual security post, but the eyes that turned to her held wonder rather than the casual dismissal she had grown accustomed to. The emergency footage had been played and replayed throughout the ship, showing her and Chen moving through conditions that should have been lethal. The medical scans confirm it, the chief physician announced to the gathered delegates. Both Security Chief Crax and Ambassador Chen possess physiological adaptations far beyond standard parameters. Their cellular structure, bone density, and muscle composition suggest evolution in high-gravity environments with extreme environmental pressures. Crax maintained her composed stance, though she noticed Chen's slight smile from across the chamber. The human diplomat looked perfectly at ease, as if having her true nature revealed was of no more concern than discussing the weather. The Centaurian delegate rose first, their crystalline form catching the light. "We have long classified such adaptations as dangerous. The regulations regarding Deathworld species were created to protect the stability of our alliance." With respect, Chen interrupted smoothly. "Those regulations were based on fear rather than understanding. You've all seen the footage. Our abilities didn't threaten stability. They preserved it." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Crax watched as various delegates consulted their data tablets, reviewing the incident reports. The ship's logs clearly showed how their intervention had prevented a catastrophic core breach. "The human speaks truth." A new voice joined the discussion. Crax turned to see Logger, the verdant representative, stepping forward. Their branches swayed with nervous energy. "During the crisis, I observed both the security chief and the ambassador. They showed not just physical capability, but remarkable restraint and control." The chamber grew quiet as Logger continued. "They could have revealed themselves at any time, used their strength to dominate. Instead, they chose to protect and serve, even at the cost of their own secrets." Crax felt Chen's gaze meet hers across the room. They had discussed this possibility during their late-night planning sessions. the chance that their revelation might lead to understanding rather than rejection. But hoping for it and seeing it unfold were very different things. "There is another matter to consider," the ship's captain added, rising from his chair. "Our sensors detected 3 other instances during the crisis where impossible feats were performed. Sealed doors manually forced open in sections with crushing gravity. Emergency repairs completed in toxic atmospheres without protective gear." Chen stepped forward. "Because we're not alone. There are others like us, serving quietly throughout the galaxy. Different adaptations, different worlds, but all choosing to help rather than hide." The council chamber erupted in overlapping conversations. Cracks watched as realization spread across faces of various species. How many times had unexplainable saves occurred during crisis? How many miraculous interventions had been the work of hidden Deathworlders? Perhaps the Centaurian delegate spoke again, their tone thoughtful. "We have been approaching this incorrectly. What we viewed as a threat might actually be an untapped resource." "Not a resource," Cracks said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to her. "Allies. Partners. We don't seek to dominate or control. We simply wish to serve without hiding who we are." Chen nodded in agreement. "Earth has remained unlisted as a death world because we believed it was the only way to participate in galactic society. How many other worlds might be doing the same? How much potential have we lost to fear?" The chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. Cracks could see the shift in expressions, the moment when fear began to give way to curiosity. She thought of all the others like them, watching this moment from their own hidden positions throughout the galaxy. "We stand at a crossroads," Chen continued, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "We can cling to old fears, or we can embrace new possibilities. The choice is yours." 6 months after the meteor incident, the Eternal Harmony's observation deck hosted a gathering unlike any before. Crack stood at the viewport, watching vessels arrive from across the galaxy. Each ship carried representatives from worlds previously unlisted in official records, the hidden Deathworlders finally stepping into the light. "The Magma-born delegation just docked," Chen reported, joining her at the window. "Their environmental suits are just for show now. No need to hide their heat resistance anymore." Crack smiled, remembering how quickly things had changed after their revelation. The Council's decision to end discriminatory policies had opened floodgates of information. Dozens of species had come forward, each adapted to conditions that standard wisdom had deemed impossible to survive. "The training facility is ready," Crack said, turning from the viewport to watch the gathering crowd. "The engineering team finished reinforcing the gravity chambers yesterday. We can simulate conditions from 0 to 60 times standard gravity." Chen nodded approvingly. "Perfect for the first class. Did you see the application numbers? Over 300 candidates from 42 different worlds." The Special Response Force had been Chen's idea, a unit specifically composed of beings from extreme environments. Their unique adaptations would allow them to handle emergencies that would prove fatal to standard crews. The Council had approved it unanimously, recognizing the potential benefits of having such capabilities officially sanctioned and properly trained. "Commander Cracks," a voice called from the entrance. A young Nexidian stood there, no longer hiding her natural grace and strength. "The candidates are assembled in the main hall." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Cracks replied, feeling the surge of pride. Her people now served openly throughout the fleet, their abilities recognized as assets rather than threats. "We'll be there shortly." As the lieutenant left, Chen pulled up the training roster on her datapad. "It's quite a mix. We have deep-sea adaptives from Europa, radiation-resistant beings from the pulsar worlds, even a few atmospheric swimmers from the gas giant colonies. Different solutions to survival," Cracks mused, echoing their conversation from months ago, each bringing their own strengths to the team. They made their way to the main hall, passing crews of mixed species working together openly. The ship itself had been modified to accommodate their various needs, with sections maintaining different gravitational and atmospheric conditions, What had once been seen as dangerous diversity was now celebrated as evolutionary brilliance. The candidates stood at attention as they entered. Beings of all shapes and sizes, each evolved to survive conditions that would kill most species instantly. Some bore visible signs of their adaptations: reinforced exoskeletons, specialized breathing apparatus, thermally resistant skin. Others, like humans and Nexidians, carried their strength hidden beneath more standard appearances. Welcome to the first Extreme Environment Response Unit training course. Chen began, her voice carrying easily through the hall. Each of you represents the best of your worlds, adapted to conditions that most would consider impossible. Together, we'll learn to use these abilities not just to survive, but to protect and serve the entire galaxy. Crack stepped forward to join her. You've all lived in hiding, restraining your true capabilities to fit someone else's definition of normal. That ends today. Here, you will learn to embrace your full potential. She saw the same expression on every face, the relief of no longer having to hide, the excitement of finally being able to use their abilities openly. It mirrored what she had felt that day in engineering with Chen, when necessity had forced them to reveal their true nature. The galaxy is changing, Chen concluded, sharing a knowing look with Carax. And we're going to help guide that change. Not as hidden Deathworlders, but as proud representatives of our worlds and their unique challenges. Through the hall's viewport, stars stretched into infinity, each one potentially harboring another world of extraordinary adaptations waiting to be discovered. The future they had dreamed of was finally beginning.